Peace, and welcome to another episode of the Quranic Remedies, where we spend about 15 minutes exploring a page from the Quran together and seeing how we can apply the verses to our lives. And hopefully, with God's permission, it helps us heal our brain, body, mind, and soul. So today we'll be reading from chapter 8, The Spoils, from verses 17 to 25. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge to God from the accursed devil. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. فَلَمْ تَقْتُلُوهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى وَلْيُبْلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ مِنْهُ بَلَاءً حَسَنًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. You have not killed him, but rather God killed him. And you have not shot when you did shoot, but rather God is the one who shot. To test the believers, a good test from him. Indeed, God is all-knowing, all-hearing. ذَلِكُمْ وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ مُوهِنُ كَيْدَ الْكَافِرِينَ. That, and God is breaking the plan of the rejectors. إن تستفتحوا فقد جاءكم الفتح وإن تنتهوا فهو خير لكم وإن تعودوا نعد ولن تغني عنكم فئتكم شيئا ولو كثرت وأن الله مع المؤمنين. If you are seeking conquest, then the conquest has come to you, and if you desist, that is better for you. However, if you return, then we will return, and your group will not avail you a thing, even if it's large in numbers. God is with the believers. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله ورسوله ولا تولوا عنه وأنتم تسمعون. O you have believed, obey God and His Messenger, and do not turn away from Him while you are listening. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ قَالُوا سَمِعْنَا وَهُمْ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ. And do not be like those who said we listened, yet they do not listen. إِنَّ الشَّرَّ الدَّوَابِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ الصُّمُّ الْبُكْمُ الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. The worst of the creatures with God are the deaf and dumb, those that cannot reason. وَلَوْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ فِيهِمْ خَيْرًا لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ وَلَوْ أَسْمَعَهُمْ لِتَوَلُّوا وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. If God knew there is any goodness in them, He would have allowed them to listen. And if He did allow them to listen, they would turn away in aversion. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَجِيبُوا لِلَّهِ وَلِلرَّسُولِ إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يُحَوِّلُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِهِ وَأَنَّهُ إِلَيْهِ تُحْشَرُونَ. O you have believed, respond to God and to the Messenger when He calls you to which gives you life, and know that God intervenes between a person and his heart, and that unto Him you shall be gathered. وَاتَّقُوا فِتْنَةً لَا تُصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْكُمْ خَاصَّةً وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. Be aware of a trial that does not strike only those of you who are unjust, and know that God is severe in retribution. Sadaq Allahu al-Azim. God the Great said the truth. The verses here are going on in regards to how God was telling us about warfare and how it's important for us to fight when the duty for us to fight occurs. But here we get a concept of what submission truly means, what the word "in the name of God" truly represents. Where here, despite us understanding that God is the one who's controlling life and death, we're understanding the concept of killing. Killing is you causing somebody to die when it is yet his time naturally for him to face the death that God has ordained for him. So you're cutting somebody's life short, and this is why it's considered killing rather than just causing death. Now, the thing that we need to understand here is that God is taking the accountability and the responsibility. And just like when you're shooting the gun or shooting an arrow in the middle of a war, God there is also taking the responsibility. So here, God is freeing you of any sin that is pertaining to the actual warfare because He is taking accountability for the actual action. But you are being used as a tool in that moment for God to fulfill His command or to fulfill His word or to fulfill what He wants to fulfill through you. And that's one of the biggest honors a human can have, where God is using you as a tool to fulfill what God wants to fulfill. So this is what it means to say in the name of God. If I say in the name of God and I am fighting in the middle of war for God, and at that point, God is the one who's using me as a soldier. If I say in the name of God and I feed somebody who's hungry, God is the one who fed him through me. And I'm just simply taking that purification and taking the reward that is associated for God literally using me in those moments. And me as a believer who's submitted, I would love to be under God's control, and for my will to even be removed from me, and for me to do exactly what God has willed for me to do, where I am in complete control by my Lord. Obviously, us as human beings, we have been given the ability to choose, other than while the animals and other creatures, they don't have the ability to choose. Rather, they do exactly what God has programmed them and ordered them to do. But with this responsibility that we have, despite us wishing as believers that we did not have this responsibility and we were under God's control completely, there's a bigger reward associated to it, because you are now actively choosing to submit to God. You are actively accepting and agreeing that you're supposed to be under God's control. And now you're also being given something that is considered an amazing gift, which is the ability to reason and for you to comprehend. And so that you have this initiative where you start to complete the command of God based on what God is showing you, instead of going off direct triggers where in how certain animals or even how certain angels work by the direct command of God. This programming that we have innate to us, which God has given us as a human being, it gives us a greater reward and the privilege of getting closer to God. So yes, there is a good thing in regards to why God has given us the free will, but it's an easier path for us not to have it and to be under the complete control of God. But God as well, he's telling us in this concepts of where he is taking over us and taking accountability for the actions that we're choosing to do in the name of God, that this is a good test for the believers, because it's increasing you in rewards, it's increasing you in purification, and you're going to be closer and more loved by God. But God here is also showing us something in regards to how mercy works, so that for us to learn and for us to experience truly on how God deals with confrontation. God is saying here to the disbelievers that if they are seeking conquest, then the conquest is at their door. So obviously God is telling us as well that the conquest or that God is on the side of the believers, and God is the one who gives victory to whom he pleases. But here he's giving a challenge to disbelievers. He's saying, if you really want to fight, then here you go. The fight is at your doors. But if you desist, it's better for you. But notice now that when the disbelievers or the rejectors were willing to fight the believers, God is saying that if you desist, we will also desist, or we will, if you desist, then it's better for you. And if you return, then we will return. So we have understood now that God, who is clement, who is forgiving, who is merciful, even to the disbelievers, when they start to move back and revert away from the limits that they're not supposed to cross, then God is also allowing that retribution to be lifted away from them. And he's not going as far as destroying them, even though he has the right to do so. But this is something where we can learn that even within our enemies and people who want to confront us or hurt us, and they're trespassing certain limits and they're hurting us in the process, as soon as they desist or stop because of our pressure or because they choose to stop, then it is not for us to sit there and pursue them to try to get more revenge from them or to impose a punishment on them, when we have already been using our ways to punish and pressure them before what they're doing for us. So this is where even God is giving the ability for the believers to receive some mercy and some forgiveness, because he is not going through the full retribution, which, as again, he's entitled to. And this is how we can understand certain concepts in regards to how God deals with individuals and people who want to cross limits, and us applying that, we are getting closer to God. And then we are being people, we are understanding as well that in regards to confrontations, that God is with us. So we start to not be fearful of confrontations, and we are taught on how to deal with confrontation in something in a way that is very pleasing to God and for us as well. And now God is telling us something in regards to the reason or the capability of reasoning. And it's happening because of two things. Reason is because you are able to listen and for you to use your mind, and that is how you are capable of comprehending. Notice how here God is not mentioning the sights when he's saying the worst of the creatures are the deaf and dumb, those that cannot reason or comprehend. So it's very imperative for us to be able to hear the words and to listen to the words and pay attention to the words, and then for us to sit and process the words, for us to truly understand what is being said. This is not only pertaining to the words of God, but this is pertaining to all things that are being presented to you. Even if you're a person that is not agreeing with the worldview or the perspective that is being presented to you, it does take your mind and your ears to understand and comprehend what the person is saying, but it does not necessitate that you have to believe or follow what the person is saying. Now here, God is also making something that is very aware to us. that God is guiding people that have goodness within their hearts. They are the people who are capable of actually listening because they have a worldview which they innately understood, and it is innate to every human being, where they want to do better for themselves and better for the people around them. This concept of goodness is you being selfless more than selfish and making sure that what God has ordered is being upheld into the world. Someone who has goodness in their heart understands there's a hierarchy, and they allow people to stay in the positions, and they respect the positions that are above them and the positions that are below them. There's a lot of concepts that are attached to the understanding of what goodness is. But the more goodness that you have in your heart, the more God is going to allow you to listen. And God says that these disbelievers or rejectors, they just simply reject this goodness that is within inside them, and they did not practice their goodness. They did not grow any goodness, and they are just people who are wicked. And the more wicked they are, the more they're going to be averting away from what God is saying, and they are not capable of hearing. That's why God calls them deaf, dumb, and blind. And the more they go in that path, the more deafness they're going to have, the more terrible mind they're going to have to endure, and at the same time they're going to be more and more blind. So obviously God is presenting the thing to us in a binary form where it's very polar, but yet there is a scale on how much on how deaf you are or how much you're capable of listening. And for us to become aware, we have to use these senses that God has given us, especially when we are also reminding ourselves of God and trying to stay close to God, because that's truly where our senses start to work as efficient as possible. Because as God says earlier to us, you're not the one who shot, you're not the one who killed, but rather God is the one who killed, and God is the one who shot. We started to understand that when I'm feeding somebody, I'm not the one who fed him, but rather God has fed them. And when I'm using my ears to listen and to witness against people, I'm witnessing for God. So in that moment, my ear is for God and my eyes are for God and my words should be for God. And at that moment, I'm being a beacon and a representative of what God has said to do. And therefore, I am a person that is technically guided by what God has said. But we notice now that the disbelievers, and as God says that these are the worst creatures in the eyes of God or with God, are the ones that are not capable of reasoning. But here we see that the concept of obey God and his messenger, and now we see something that is very incredible for us to remember. And it says, do not turn away from him. It didn't say turn away from them, talking about a plurality, but rather it's talking about a singularity. And when the messenger is speaking, he's speaking in the name of God, and the messenger is acting as that beacon who's delivering the words of God that God has said to him directly or through a medium, and so that he would be able to deliver this message to you. So it's something that is extremely imperative for you as a human being to understand the commandments of your Lord, for you to be able to fulfill it, so you could do what God is telling you to do, and therefore you find life. As God says that when the messenger, and God, again, in the singular, he calls you to what gives you life, or to what restores you, or to what is going to give you the actual life, which is the hereafter. And God states to us something that is extremely important, that he is capable of intervening between the mind of a person or the heart of a person and the person themselves. So when we hear the words of God, God is capable of maneuvering us in a way in our mind to reach to the position that we need to reach for us to get the guidance that we require. And this is something that is incredible, because we start to realize that these words that God has given the blessed prophet that we are reading, they have such a huge importance to us, because it is reprogramming us and it is healing us. And that's why we need to give in to what the words are saying. And what we're recognizing and what we're witnessing is something where it is imperative for us to truly remember and to upkeep. Because if we start to play certain mental gymnastics in our minds to try to give certain ideologies victory when it does not align, and we clearly see it does not align, but we're trying to maneuver the words and so that we give ourselves the victory instead of God, God is making something that is extremely clear for us, that we have to start being aware that a certain trial does not strike us, which is only for those that are unjust, and that God is severe in retribution. So this verse here is a very clear example for those that do come up with lies or certain interpretations in regards to what the Quran is saying that does not align with the Quranic narrative, that they are going to have a trial. And this trial or test is there for them to feel the burden of their lie, and so that they would return. But God is telling us that these people are unjust. So one thing and one way for you to truly measure that if your understanding is from God and it is what God is saying in the Quran, and it's not something that you have came up with in your mind and you're just associating it to God, is by measuring the success that you have in your life. If you got deluded in a verse and you're following something that is diverting away from what God has told us to do, you're going to now have to struggle by having certain trials in your life, and at the same time you see a lot of doors being closed around you, rather than the person who's following what God has said, who God promised them victory and promised them success. They see more doors opening and more protection and more security from God. And this is where, when we do see certain levels that we have reached in our lives, where we feel like we have came really close to God, then that feeling and that circumstance and that blessing that we had at one point, when we see it starting to be diminishing, then we have to start to adjust in regards to what we're doing now in certain actions or certain thoughts, and shy away from them and stop them, and so that we could return to that epitome of the connection that we had with our Lord. And this is where it's an amazing life, when you start to truly observe, understand, listen, and ponder about what is being presented to you and compare it to what God is saying. And God is giving you the equation in the Quran on how to think and how to approach certain matters and how to act. And this is why this book is very imperative for us, because it truly is the guideline for this life. And God has not made any mistakes in this book. And this book is guiding us to what is upright. And with that said, I hope you guys are enjoying these. All praise to our Lord, the Lord of the worlds, and peace be upon you.